way back in around the year 2000, I talked my way into a job with the fastest tech startup in Silicon Valley's history. And I was turned down for the job numerous times, but I talked my way into this job. And little did they know, one of the reasons I was terrified every day and why I was so over my skis with this job was because a few years before I was a waiter at a hotel. And a few years before that, I was homeless and living in my truck. So imposter syndrome, yeah, big time. But I talked my way into this job, and that's going to be the topic of another episode of asking for what you want and really kind of going for it. Somehow, the way I got that job, I keep forgetting how audacious I was to go and do that. But I got the job, and here's what's really cool. The first year of my job, I made this thing called President's Club. There was Club and President's Club. Club was for people who made their number or did better, and President's Club were for people who overachieved in such a fashion. And only two rookies in the company that year made it to President's Club, and I got to go to this island called Lanai in Hawaii. And remember, again, I was a waiter a couple years before, and I was homeless before that. So for me, taking my wife at the time and going to Lanai was breathtaking. And then um, we went to Maui to another hotel, the Ritz Carlton, uh, and it sticks to my craw because I worked at the Four Seasons for so long that going to the Ritz Carlton was like slumming it. But really honest, it was incredible. So I made President's Club that year, but my friends who I worked with, Mike O'Donnell and Greg Collins, they were the big dogs in the company at the time. Number one, both of them were the number one sales guys. They work on everything together. They were amazing, but they weren't like fast friends because they were loud and boisterous and committed and funny as all get out. And I was shy and kind of quiet. But because I was successful, they took me under their wing and they really helped me build a career. But one of the things they said before we went to President's Club was, the good news is Tom Mendoza knows who you are. The bad news is Tom Mendoza knows who you are. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I knew Tom. He was the president of the company. He was charismatic and he was a great leader. And he was really good to people, but he was also tough and competitive. And that was kind of terrifying to hear that. Um, but I went and I met Tom, and I met the CEO, and I met all the leadership, and what an incredible group of people. Never again was I able to work with such a team, and I worked with some really great leadership in my subsequent career. But there was something special about this company, and a lot of it I think had to do with the culture that was brought by Tom Mendoza. So after I left NetApp, years later, I wrote down this list of 10 things that I learned from this incredible leader. Now, what I gotta tell you is, I recorded this podcast uh, once already, and my voice cracked through the whole thing because I get really emotional to what these people did for me in the world. Greg and Mike and Tom Mendoza and quite a few other people, but we're not going to make this list of who's who of who made Mark who he is. Um, but this list of 10 things that Tom Mendoza taught me, and he didn't teach these things outright. It's what I saw him do by example, and I wrote them down, and I've lived by them ever since. And they've informed my career. They've changed my career. They inform my coaching and what I do today with my executives. So let's go through them. Number one, never speak bad about anybody. Now, everybody knows we shouldn't gossip, but how many people actually live that? How many people don't take the juiciness and the opportunity to put themselves up by putting someone else down? And how distasteful is it when you hear leadership doing that? Never speak bad about anybody. Tom, Tom was tough on people, but you never heard him. You knew people weren't doing their job. You never heard him talk about them that way. He addressed it directly. He dealt with it with that person only, and that's commendable. I went to a company after NetApp, and I was sitting at a table at our kickoff, and this was a really rocking, fast-growing company. It was the darling of Silicon Valley at the time, and we were sitting at the table, and everybody at the table were making fun of and putting down the leadership of the company. And I never heard that at NetApp. Nobody would ever do that at NetApp. One, because they didn't talk that way. And two, because leadership was so cool. Why would you ever say that? And I turned to my immediate boss and I said, what's going on? Why are they putting everybody down? And he said, Mark, you're not at NetApp anymore. You're in the real world. And boy, did I learn that. Okay, so never speak bad about anybody. Number two, be passionate about what you do. If you're not, find it. If you can't find it, find something different that you can be passionate about. And that was one of the, again, and one of the other uniques about the things about the culture was we were passionate. We were selling computer storage, but we were fighting the fight of good and evil in all our souls were dependent on who won the storage wars in the tech business. And that's how passionate we were about what we did. And it made it much more fun to be passionate. I'm passionate about what I do now. I left the tech industry because I didn't have the passion to sell anymore. I wanted to help other people be successful. So that's why I do what I do. Number three is why I've been a successful sales guy. Customers are lifelong relationships. My job is their success first and foremost. Customers are lifelong relationships. Our job is their success first and foremost. That's why when I went from startup to startup to startup in my career, every one of my customers at NetApp were my customers at all the other companies. Not even if they didn't buy, they would see me for a meeting. They would allow me to come in and talk about whatever company I'm in because my customers were lifelong relationships. And here's the kicker: when I became a coach, when I hung out my shingle to do what I'm doing now, my first six customers were my first six clients were my former customers. Can you believe that? They came like they were like, I don't know what coaching is, but whatever you're doing, the way you talk to us and the relationship that we built, we're in. And that kind of blows me away. So even today, the echoes of customers or lifelong relationships have helped me in this business, decades later. Uh, Competitive means doing my absolute best, improving and learning as I go. Gracious when I lose, gracious when I win. You never met anybody more competitive than Mr. Mendoza, but nobody classier. When I learned to lose graciously, that was even better. That paid dividends afterwards because I'd be invited back to compete again if I provided value and I lost graciously and I did my triage in a respectful manner. I was always invited back, and then I would eventually win. Number five, and he lived this one every day. I am the culture of an organization. It starts with me. I'm the culture of the organization. I don't walk into the culture. I create the culture. I emanate the culture. It's taking 100% responsibility of my impact on the people around me. That leads to number six: lead by example. Right, this whole organization, the senior leadership team worked as hard or harder than anybody in the organization. You wanted to work hard for them. It was amazing that they walked their talk. Number seven, and this is my favorite. Have I said that numerous times? This is my favorite. This one's my favorite also. Catch someone doing something right and tell them and tell everyone. Catch someone doing something right, tell them and tell everyone. This one's freaking incredible. I don't know how many times you would see an email go out to the entire company. So and so did such and such, and it had this impact. And it didn't matter if they were an admin, they were someone who worked in the cafeteria, or they were an executive. It didn't matter. It was, you catch someone doing something right and you tell them. And here's the other thing: Tom Mendoza would call you. He would call anybody in the organization, a security guard, if he heard that someone did something really cool for the company or for anybody else. He would call them and leave them a voicemail, or if he catch them, he'd talk to them. I have voicemails from Tom Mendoza that I still have to this day. When I did something right and I got a call from the president of the freaking company. And remember, I felt like a fraud all the time through most of my success. So getting a call like that, telling me he heard I did a great job in the sale. He heard that I crushed my goal. He heard that I helped another sales guy do something, like it didn't matter even if it was business, like were you kind to someone or something like that. It was just so amazing. So catch someone doing something right and tell everybody that they're doing something right. Number eight, the CEO, the people in shipping, the admins, the cleaning crew, uh, all contribute to the success of the company. Treat everyone with the same respect. And he did that every single day. He knew everybody's name. I don't know how he had the bandwidth to just touch everybody's life the way he did. And I do that to this day. Very, very cool. Number 9, find the fun in every tough job. That was part of the culture also. It was a tough job. It was stressful, but people had fun doing it. I remember my friend Greg going into a competitive situation using Rock'em Sock'em robots. Like how fun is that? How, like just catch people off guard. Really cool. Number 10. And this one I've never heard him even say. I just watched it. So when you're in one of these kinds of companies, you go to most of us were based in Silicon Valley, so you go to these sales kickoffs, and it was started off very small. There were only a few people at the first couple of kickoffs, and then it grew because it was again the fastest growing company in Silicon Valley history. Cisco was the one before that, same investors in this one, so this one was growing that fast, and I had the opportunity to work for 4 of the fastest growing companies. So my career has been totally blessed. But you'd go to California or Las Vegas or wherever the kickoff was, and you go into these hotel ballrooms, and you wouldn't know anybody. Now the company's growing so fast, there would be a bunch of people who didn't know anybody, and they'd be just kind of milling around. And then you would see the president of the company walk over to a group of people or to someone standing by themselves, stick his hand out and go, "Hey, I'm Tom Mendoza. Who are you? What do you do for the company? Hi, I'm Tom Mendoza. Who are you?" And he would take them and he would bring them over to someone else and introduce them and say, "Hey, you really need to know so and so." And then he would just introduce people around, and that became the culture. And I watched this in awe. The humility of bringing people into the organization, thank you, welcoming them into the organization. And how do you feel when you're brought in such a gracious way? This company just for me set the standard for how I conducted myself subsequently in other companies. It's how I evaluated companies I wanted to go to. I worked for a company called ServiceNow and Data Domain. Both of them, again, the leadership on both of those companies just could bring me to tears. How much they did for me in my career. Uh, but we'll go back one more time to the culture in NetApp and how it was so competitive, fierce, hardworking, but also human. There were people in the company who got cancer. And their jobs and their health insurance were there for them when they went, even if they were gone for a year. I watched the humanity in that company over and over. For myself, after about 7 or 8 years, I had something happen with me and my immediate manager. And there was, it was someone I really looked up to, a role model for me, and they turned on me. They just decided they didn't like me anymore, and I didn't have the internal fortitude to deal with something like that. It didn't matter how many friends I had on the executive team. It didn't matter, what my relationships were in the organization. It was really, really hard for me to have someone who wasn't in my corner. So that made the stress of the whole situation too much for me. So I wound up, after being 200% of my goal that year, which was really kind of fun, making a ton of money, I wound up quitting. But before I quit, Tom Mendoza happened to be in town, and he had me come over and chat with him for a while. And he told me that one of the executives had was in overwhelm and was burnout, and he was taking a couple months off, and that made me feel better about myself. And then he said that he understood and that he had my back. And then I got a call from my vice president, Eric Mann, who was up in New York, another guy who just treated me so well. I learned so much from him. He had me come up to New York on the train, and he sat me down and he said, "Look, you're valuable. We have your back." Now, remember, this is a fast-growing tech startup. Like they don't have to do these things. And Eric said, "Look, we can't hold your territory because someone has to service your territory. But what we'll do is we'll pay your benefits. Take a few months off, and we'll pay your benefits so you don't lose your benefits, and you have a job when you come back." And like I couldn't believe that. It took me about a month to stop vibrating, and then I I took about 4 months off. They paid my benefits for 4 months. And then I came back and I had a job. And it was just kind of uncanny that you can be that competitive, that fierce in business, and that humanistic at the same time. It can be done. So everything that I learned from Tom Mendoza, these 10 things that I'm going to have in the show notes, everything I learned from the leadership that I was fortunate enough to work with. Is in my coaching practice. It's how I coach the executives I work with. None of this originated with me. It originated with the people who taught me. Yes, I read a lot of books. I've learned a lot about leadership, all this stuff, but I learned it from the best. And for me, Tom Mendoza is the pinnacle of the people that I've worked for. And if it sounds like I'm gushing, it's because it changed my life. I was not on the best trajectory. And when I finally figured myself out and I put myself in situations that were too scary, too big for me, but I wanted to do them because I wanted to provide for my wife. I wanted to provide for my family and my children. Like, they were the people who I was lucky enough to be part of so that I could be the consummate professional, so I could be good at what I did, so that my customers were my customers for life and now lifelong friends, so that I can teach the people that I work with these attributes. So hopefully you learn something. I want to put this out in posterity because I don't know if he'll ever write a leadership book. There's plenty. You can find. He does speak on leadership if you Google Tom Mendoza on YouTube. In fact, maybe I'll put a couple of really good videos in the show notes for you. You can learn all about him. To all of you, I just appreciate your time and your attention. Be gentle with yourself. We're still in the middle of COVID. Things are still stressful. Watch that allostatic load. Be good to yourself, to others. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.